Pablo Picasso. I mean, you've heard the name, right? You could easily argue he was the most influential artist of the entire 20th century. This was a guy who didn't just play by the rules of art, he completely rewrote them. But the story of how he became such a revolutionary, well, it's this wild journey of constant, radical change. Let's dive into how one man reinvented art itself. So this really gets to the heart of it all. How on earth did the very same artist paint both of these pieces? I mean, they look like they're from different planets. On one side, you have his early work, like this unbelievably realistic portrait, a stunningly realistic portrait of his sister, Lola. And get this, he painted it when he was just 14 years old. That's right, 14. Before he was a revolutionary, Picasso was a child prodigy who had already completely mastered classical, academic realism. And then, on the other hand, you have this. Three Musicians, painted just a couple of decades later in 1921. It's flat, it's geometric, and it just completely shatters any normal sense of reality. So how did he get from A to B, from classical prodigy to abstract revolutionary? That's the story we're going to unpack. All right, to really get the revolution, you first have to understand the prodigy. So let's go back to the beginning, his early life in Spain, and see just how this incredible transformation kicked off. Picasso's talent was frankly almost unbelievable right from the start. At just 13, he applied to an advanced class at the School of Fine Arts in Barcelona. The entrance exam, he finished it in a single week, a task that took other students a full month. There's even this famous story that his father, who was also a painter, was so blown away by his son's skill that he just vowed to give up painting himself because he believed young Pablo had already completely surpassed him. So after he moves to Paris, which was basically the art capital of the world, his style starts to shift dramatically, and it was all based on his emotional state. This leads to his first two major stylistic phases. You've got the Blue period, which was triggered by the tragic suicide of a close friend. You can just feel that pain in the somber blue tones and the subjects, like beggars and prostitutes. But then, a few years later, he falls in love, and his whole world just explodes into the Rose period. Suddenly, it's full of warm pinks and oranges, featuring circus performers. This shows you, right from the get-go, that for Picasso, art and life were totally inseparable. But look, those emotional periods, that was just the warm-up act. Let's get to the artistic movement that would absolutely shatter the art world and cement his legacy forever. And that movement was Cubism. Think about it. For centuries, Western art was all about creating the illusion of a 3D world from one single viewpoint. Well, Cubism, which Picasso co-founded with Georges Braque, basically took that idea and threw it right out the window. They weren't trying to paint what they saw. They were trying to paint what they knew was there. They wanted to show an object from the front, the side, and the top, all at the same time. And this is the painting that fired the first shot of the revolution, Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. When he first showed this thing in his studio, his fellow artists were horrified. The figures were fractured, the perspective was just gone, and the faces on the right were heavily influenced by African masks he'd seen. His great rival Henri Matisse was so shocked he actually called it a hoax. But Picasso? He was just getting started. Cubism itself actually evolved in stages. It started with that raw African-influenced period. Then came what's called analytic cubism, where he and Braque would basically deconstruct or analyze an object, breaking it down into these geometric shapes, often using just one or two colors. And from there, it evolved into synthetic cubism, where they started rebuilding images, even pasting things like newspaper clippings right onto the canvas. In the process, they invented the art form we now know as collage. And here is that theory in practice. This is his portrait of his art dealer. I know, at first it just looks like a total mess of brown and gray shapes. But look closer. You can start to see things. A hint of a face, maybe hands clasped in the lap, a bottle on a table nearby. He's taken a real person and completely disassembled him on the canvas, forcing us to see the world in a brand new, fragmented way. But Picasso's art wasn't just about playing stylistic games. No. It became an incredibly powerful political weapon, one that he used to confront the biggest horrors of his time. And nowhere is this clearer than in his masterpiece, Guernica. When someone asked him to explain what it all meant, Picasso basically said that it was his job to make the image, and it's our job as the audience to find the meaning for ourselves. So what prompted it? The painting was his immediate furious reaction to the Nazi bombing of a civilian town, Guernica, during the Spanish Civil War. It was just a horrific act of violence carried out to support the fascist dictator Francisco Franco. Guernica became an instant global symbol of the horrors of war. That stark, newsprint-like black and white look was probably influenced by his partner at the time, the photographer Dora Maar, who actually documented its creation. Its political power was so huge that Picasso sent it to the Museum of Modern Art in New York with one condition: it could not return to Spain until democracy was restored. That finally happened in 1981. And Picasso's defiance? It was legendary. During the Nazi occupation of Paris, a Gestapo officer raided his apartment, saw a picture of Guernica, and sneered, "Did you do that?" Picasso's comeback was just ice cold. "No, you did." So we've got the prodigy, the revolutionary, the political activist. But there is another, much darker side to this story. We need to look at the Picasso paradox, the very complicated legacy of the man himself. First, let's just talk about his productivity. It was completely off the charts. When he died, his estate had over 45,000 unsold works. He was just a force of nature who never stopped creating, right up until the very end of his life. But here's the paradox right at the heart of his legacy. On one side, you have the artistic genius who changed art forever. On the other side, you have a man who was notoriously cruel, especially to the women in his life. He once told a lover that women are machines for suffering. His own granddaughter wrote that he would ingest women and then crush them onto his canvas. The human cost of his genius was immense, leaving a trail of nervous breakdowns and even suicides among those who were closest to him. And yet, his public art is still a celebrated, beloved part of our cultural landscape. This sculpture in Chicago, for example, was a gift from Picasso to the city. Millions of people interact with and enjoy his work every day, a lot of them having no idea about the darkness behind its creation. Which leaves us with this final, really difficult question. When you have a figure like Picasso, whose artistic contributions were so monumental, but whose personal behavior was so destructive, can we really separate the art from the artist? Or should we? Or are they just forever tangled together? It's a question the art world and really all of us are still grappling with today.